Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here at my next Avatar news update video. And yeah, this one's interesting. Mainly just going to talk about the recent Mike and Bryan interview that came out for the first episode of the Nickelodeon animation podcast. And the first episode was, of course, with Mike and Bryan. And I just want to talk a little bit about that. There's one piece of news that came out of the interview, but I do want to cover it overall. I would say it's only really worth listening to this interview if you haven't listened to a lot of other general Mike and Bryan interviews before. A lot of the stuff they cover here is stuff we've already heard in other interviews. How the pitch for Avatar first went, some ideas about production on Korra and Avatar and stuff like that. Working together, a little bit of like what they were into before that, some of the things that go into like the inspiration for Avatar in the first place. And just in general, it's a very general look at the basic history of just their work on all of these on the two shows. No details really gone into. If you're looking for like extra little bits of information that Mike and Bryan could reveal about like characters, plot, or anything like that, none of that is touched on. They barely mention characters. It is purely kind of focused on the more animation technical, how the show is made side of things. So it's one of those things where, like, if you really, really, really like to listen to all of the content, listen to it. But really, if you've seen any interviews, there's not a lot here for you. The piece of news, though, that's worth talking about here is finally confirmation from someone that the Legend of Korra comics have in fact been delayed. Bryan brings it up at the end, just mentioning that, look, the show is continuing. We are doing Korra comics with Dark Horse, and he just really casually mentioned, like, he's kind of almost being like interrupted a little bit, but he does mention, they've kind of been delayed. So it seems quite vague, and at the very least, they talk about the Korra comics nowhere near in the way that like they are only like 6 months away or 6 months away. This seems like it's still a good bit off. So I think when we finally get news at San Diego Comic-Con about the Korra comics, it's going to be revealed to be like early, if not mid 2017. I think some production stuff has happened. I think the rumors about Brittany Williams no longer being on board is probably true, though this interview does not mention that at all. Like, literally, the Korra comic section of the interview is about 20 seconds long. It's just they mention they are doing Korra comics, and Mike is the writer, Bryan is helping with it, and that they're happening and they've been delayed. That is literally the full extent of what is talked about with this the Korra comics. So, interesting that we finally get that, and so I think that basically takes away the fall 2016 release date, and probably takes out 2016 full stop as a release date. But again, I don't know where the production is on it, but just like I said, the way they were talking about it didn't seem like it was really close to coming out. They do mention a little bit about their own projects. Bryan talks about the general idea for Thread Worlds, which is cool. Mike talks a bit about Rebel Genius. But we know that, Rebel Genius is coming out in October. Bryan more or less says Thread Worlds, the first book, isn't going to be out until like late 2017, but even that's a stretch. It'll probably be early 2018 more likely. So his project is still a bit off, but Mike's is coming out soon, and Bryan says that it is really good. And they both do mention that they kind of helped each other a little bit on both of their projects to kind of make some of the ideas come together. So Bryan has helped, a little bit with the, Rebel Genius is coming together, and Mike has helped Bryan with Thread Worlds and some of the concepts. So, not to the point where I'd say they're probably going to like credit each other as like co-creators on both projects, but like a special thanks thing will probably be in both of their books to the other ones. So, interview is there if you wanted. Link is in the description to where you can listen to that podcast, and they're doing other ones. They're going to continue the whole idea of this Nick Animation podcast, of course, is that every week they get creators on from other Nickelodeon shows and talk about animation, but in terms of Avatar, I think that's probably about it. Maybe they'll get other people who've worked on Avatar and Korra on board. Maybe they'll get Mike and Bryan back much later on down the line. But that seems like it, and I think that in general should be like basically it for the Avatar fandom really referencing this podcast at least. So in the comments, if you have listened to the interview, let me know your thoughts. But the main thing I really want to get some reaction to is your thoughts on finally confirmation that the Legend of Korra comics have in fact been delayed from the fall 2016 date that we knew of before. So that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.